Could you go back one slide? Great, thank you. So welcome everybody to the Ceylon Park design meeting. I'm Amy Lene, project manager from the Boston Parks and Recreation Department overseeing the project. I do want to thank you all for participating in this meeting, and apologies for some of our technical challenges here. But we do really appreciate the time that you're giving from your schedule to join us this evening. And I do want to welcome any elected officials and staff who may be on the call. If you could raise your hand if you want to say anything at this time. Okay. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you go back? Haven't even covered this part. So I do want to just let you know that this meeting is being recorded. That way we can post it to the project webpage for anyone who wasn't able to attend. It should be posted in within a week, and we will put the project webpage in the chat in case you'd like to view it again or share with neighbors who are unable to attend. And then during the presentation, we just ask that you keep your video off and microphone muted. During the discussion session, we encourage you to turn your video on if you feel comfortable doing so. Next slide. Okay, great. So we want everyone to feel comfortable sharing their questions and comments, either verbally or in the chat. You can also feel free to email me directly if you want to discuss the project further. And I will put my email address in the chat as well. And then we have up on the slide some Zoom tips I think everyone's pretty familiar with. But if you are calling in on a phone, just use *9 to raise your hand, and then it'll be *6 to unmute and to mute again. If you're joining on via Zoom on a computer, just use the raise hand button and we will unmute you. I know it's a little clunky though. All right, so we can go to the next slide. So these are the topics that we'll go over this evening. We'll start with the project team introduction, the project overview, which includes the schedule. We'll have a presentation by our design team, followed by a listening and discussion session, and closing remarks and next steps. So once again, I'm Amy Lene, project manager from Boston Parks. Shauna Dixon from Parks is also joining us and moderating tonight. Alize Cabral and Ashley Gomez are important team members from the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services and great resources for community concerns. And then we have Sasaki, the landscape architecture firm on the project. So joining us tonight, Zach Crisco, a principal in charge, and Garrett Craig Lucas, the project manager, as well as Kira Sargent and Sophie Bellemare. And Alize, did you want to say something? We can unmute you.
Hey, how you doing, everyone? I'm happy to be here. I just wanted to let you guys know my name is Alize Cabral. I'm the Cape Verdean Cultural Liaison, which is listed there with amongst the other staff. Ashley was unable to be here, but she wanted me to come on her behalf as well, just to introduce ourselves and let you guys know that we're here as a resource for the mayor's office, and we can communicate with Amy if there's anything that you guys want to get in for the project, or if you can't reach Amy, you can reach us as well in collaboration with the translators, because I know sometimes there might be some folks in the meeting that want to get their points across in various offices. So feel free to reach out to me as well, interpreters and translators. I'll leave my email right in the chat.
Great. Thank you, Alize. We appreciate you. Okay, I think we can go to the project. project schedule. Great, so this is the third design meeting for the Ceylon Park improvement project. So as you can see on the schedule, the field renovation is moving forward on a separate timeline, and that's scheduled to be completed later this fall. And then the design and construction of the rest of the park will happen next year, and that's anticipated to be completed fall of 2024. So we felt that the sports field, because of its heavy use and its condition, was really something that needed to be kind of fast-tracked. And then the goal is that we can have that portion of the park open while the remainder is under construction. Great, thanks. So you're probably familiar with these if you've been to previous meetings, but these are the components that we think about going into the public park design. So community input, such as this meeting tonight, safety guidelines and regulatory guidelines, such as ADA, the City of Boston priorities, and the parks and recreation goals. And we'll cover those on the next two slides. Next slide, please. So City of Boston priorities include expanding walkable access to parks, addressing equity, climate resilience, health, and housing and community building. Next slide. And parks and recreation goals include creating spaces that are accessible and available to all, that have a diverse, balanced, and efficient mix of uses, that include meaningful and inclusive community engagement, that incorporate adaptive and resilient landscapes, and promote connections. So with that, I will turn it over to Garrett, project manager from Sasaki. And do we want to quickly check, Misa, do you want to ask again if anyone wants interpretation for Cape Verde and Creole, or if we can move forward?
Yes, sure. Se algum pessoa ali que mestre intérprete na crioulo, cabo-verdiano, deixa-nos saber, por favor, se o mestre intérprete cabo-verdiano.
Thank you, Misa. I want to apologize. For some reason, in our Zoom setup, two of the languages are working in the language channels, but not Cape Verde and Creole. So we can certainly adapt as needed, but it's helpful to know if anyone was looking for that interpretation. So.
Thank you, Misa and Amy. And thanks everyone for joining. Before we get into the design, presenting on the design process and design updates, I'll present a brief overview here on the project context, previous renovations, project goals, opportunities, and constraints. Next slide. So the first bit of context here is this context plan or context map that situates Ceylon Park within the neighborhood. Ceylon Park sits within a dense neighborhood surrounded by a number of schools noted in pink, other parks noted in green, and is connected to transit via the commuter rail and bus line adjacent to the site. You can see the proximity to Upper Upham's Corner in that quarter-mile walk radius situated in the Grove Hall neighborhood here. Next slide, please. So talking a little bit about the previous renovations, the last renovation was done in 2008. So over time, the layout of the park and program has evolved. In 2008, the turf field, the amphitheater at the entrance near Ceylon Street, and the playgrounds at Ceylon Street and at the upper play area on Magnolia Street were renovated. So since then, the park has been well used and is now in need of another renovation. Next slide, please. So why renovate today? As I mentioned, Ceylon Park is very well used. The turf field is in high use. The play areas are also well used, and because of that, there's a need just based off of the natural cycle of needing to renovate parks every 15 or 20 years to renovate the park. In addition, there's a number of priorities that have come up over the years and also throughout this design process, which is to increase accessibility. There are accessibility standards and objectives that we'd really like to meet through this renovation. Over time, some of the vegetation in the park has created blocked sight lines and some other issues that we'd like to address by promoting safety. We're also trying to create a balance of uses and think about how we could redesign the park to accommodate the uses that have evolved over time, and overall creating a resilient landscape that allows for ease of maintenance and has a successful maintenance program. Next slide, please. So talking about these opportunities and constraints, starting to show these laid out on a plan of the park here. Starting from the upper left-hand side of the slide, the basketball court, as well as the play area on Magnolia Street in the center of the page on top of the plan. Those two spaces feel a little bit disconnected from the rest of the park due to the steep elevation change in the middle of the park between the sports field and those upper zones. Additionally, that grade change is creating paths that are not ADA compliant. They're steep and difficult to navigate. Other constraints, there are multiple amenity areas that require a balance of input and shared funding. So those are some of the primary constraints on the site. Next slide, please. Considering those previous slide with this section, please. Considering those grade changes, you can see in the site section here that there's approximately 30 to 40 feet of grade change happening all within the slope between the upper play area and the sports field, and that's creating some of those ADA issues, and is also a location that's looking, especially where there is overgrown vegetation that we will manage through the renovation of the park. Next slide. So since the last meeting, we've taken a close look at the existing trees on the site, or a closer look, I should say, and we've walked the site with an arborist, and we considered whether or not the trees were in good health, if they were threatened by pests or diseases, and if some of these species were invasive species, and also considering the value that they're creating in the landscape more broadly. So in considering the condition of these trees, we noted that some trees on the slope need to be removed. Most of the trees on the site are that they need to be removed are on that steep slope. And the impetus for removing those trees is to increase visibility, improve maintenance, and allow for clearing of those invasive species that are currently there. Next slide. So the existing trees that will remain, we are taking into consideration the need to protect the root zones of those trees with our proposed design. So now on to the design process. Thanks, Effie.
So now we will give an overview of the ongoing design process that has informed the design concept that we will be presenting today. So design meeting 1 was held via Zoom in April, and it focused on park history and site analysis. And what we heard during this meeting and through the first survey were that there were some priority areas for renovation, which were the sports field, seating, additional lighting, and restroom improvements. We also learned that top activities included soccer, going to the park for walking and exercise, other sports, and use of the playground. And we also heard that safety and maintenance were common themes. And from the first survey, we had over 150 responses, and the results yielded that 81% of the respondents visit the park daily or weekly, which is fairly frequent, and that 80% of the respondents utilize the park for soccer. And we also heard, again, that the #1 concern for the park was maintenance, with concern for the sports field condition a very close second. Next slide, please. The second design meeting was held at Ceylon Park in May, where we presented the Boston Parks and Recreation goals in the project timeline. We also presented the 3 concept designs that we had created based on the feedback from the first design meeting and from the first survey. And so those 3 concepts that were presented during this time was the concept 1, play, concept 2, fitness, and concept 3, gathering. Next slide, please. And so we gathered feedback on the concept designs through a variety of ways during meeting 2. We did a lot of listening with on-site translators and interpreters in Spanish, Haitian Creole, and Cape Verdean Creole. Participants were also able to write on a site map, writing things that they love about the park, their ideas, or their concerns. Participants also were able to vote using sticky dots on the elements and areas that were part of each concept that they liked or disliked. There was also a priority and preferences survey, which was used to help determine what areas or elements of the park should be prioritized, as well as preferences for elements throughout the park, such as color themes or planting or seating types. And then there was also a second survey to gather feedback, which yielded about 36 responses. Next slide, please. So this is the combined feedback we heard on the concepts for design meeting 1 and 2. So concept 1, play, ranked the highest for the way it addressed the Upper Magnolia Street area for the playground and gathering options. Concept 1 also ranked very high for the nature play theme, which many respondents ranked with a 5, meaning they liked it a lot. We also found that water play ranked as the highest priority item of all the major feature options. Next slide, please. Concept 2, fitness ranked #1 for preferred concept plans across the board. And the way this plan addressed spectator seating surrounding the field also ranked the highest across all the options. And the way this design addressed the play and gather area at Columbia Road was also the highest ranked. Next slide, please. Concept 3, gathering, ranked 2nd overall for a preferred concept. And it was also ranked 2nd for the way it addressed spectator seating around the field. And for the gathering playground areas at Columbia Road, it received a perfect score, meaning that everyone who voted on this area on a scale of 1 to 5 gave it a 5. So you'll see that we utilized this feedback in progressing the design further that Kira will present to you next.
Oh, sorry. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Kira. I'm part of the design team. And so now we're going to get into the plan that we made from all of this feedback. We call this the schematic design plan. It's not 100% final. It's what we're going to keep developing over the summer and the fall. But it does show the direction that the Parks Department is planning on taking. To put this plan together, we start with the project goals, we take into consideration the site analysis, the history, and most importantly, community meeting from the computing input from the meetings that we had. And then we decide on what are the concrete things we can do in the park design to achieve those project goals. So again, whenever possible, we're taking in the community input, like those items Sophie just went over, including keeping water play, providing a loop up at Magnolia Street, having a nature theme for the play area, the fitness theme, and spectator seating above the field. So I'll go through each of the project goals here and say what the general design direction is. And then on the next several slides, we'll go really into detail and look at a plan showing each of the different areas of the park and how these lay out on the plan. So first, that the park is accessible and available to all. And as Garrett mentioned, this is about making it usable for everyone, but also specifically about meeting the requirements of the American with Disabilities Act. So this is something we're required to do by law, and it's appreciated by most users. We have to make the paths navigable with a wheelchair or a stroller, and also for people with lower mobility. We have to make sure that they have low slopes and there are ways for people to get up that don't include stairs. Next, we want to promote a safe environment. This is a major goal because of what a concern it was, a concern of people who use the park and was brought up in the community meetings. And the ways that our design can address this is through lighting, cameras, signage, and then, as Garrett discussed, increasing visibility on that large slope in particular, where we're going to be removing the big trees and dense vegetation. The next project goal is creating a diverse, balanced, and efficient mix of uses. So it's a large park, but it also has a lot of different uses going on. The primary one being soccer, but there's playgrounds, 2 playgrounds really, basketball, and seating, circulation routes. So a lot of different things. We want to create synergies between and we want to diversify how things are interacting with each other. Of course, we want to design for successful maintenance. We had a lot of requests for more upkeep of the restrooms and better routine maintenance. And that's certainly something that we'll work on in general. But in terms of the design direction, what we can do in this plan is convert overgrown areas into lawn to make sure that the park is easy to maintain. And we can use proven durable materials that will last for 15 to 20 years or longer. And finally, our goal to generate a resilient landscape that can adapt to future conditions means considering the existing tree canopy, like Garrett discussed with the plan, of thinking about what's going to last and what's not going to last in terms of the tree canopy, and making sure that the site can handle increased heat and rain and provide cooling for the community as it gets hotter in the future. So to do that, we need to make sure we have a diverse tree canopy, so lots of trees that can survive no matter what kind of pests or diseases come in the future, and providing a cooling station for kids and adults. So this is an image of those design directions sort of put onto a plan. So you can see how we start to think about mapping those out on the site. The biggest ones that are visible here are those major connections in terms of circulation, trying to provide ADA compliant routes from Columbia Road up to Magnolia Street. Then in terms of diversifying program, really making sure that that gathering area down at Columbia Road is meeting the needs of lots of different people who use the park, and the same thing for up at Magnolia Street. And then also making sure that we're identifying lighting and safety primarily along this route from Columbia up to Magnolia, which we heard people use often when it's dark because of the bus routes or because they're getting back home at night. Sorry, jumping ahead. So here's a picture of the plan. And I saw someone posted in the chat. Oh, there were a few comments in the chat, so I'm just going to pause on this slide, which has a lot to look at, and answer some of the questions. The first was about emergency call boxes, and that's a great question. We have 2 emergency call boxes, and that's one of the things as I go through in detail. It'll be on the sheet about safety, or the page about safety. And then the basketball court on the top, that'll be, sorry, it's one of the last slides, but it is in there. We'll talk about the updates there too. So there's a slide on kind of each area where I'm really trying to go into detail on each one. So this is the schematic design plan that takes all those goals, all those thoughts, combines a little bit from scheme 1, scheme 2, scheme 3, concept 1, 2, and 3, the favorite parts that we heard people would appreciate, and tries to put them all together with the other things we're balancing on the plan. The first item I'm going to go into in detail is circulation. And the plan keeps the main route with stairs. So sort of the fastest route from Columbia Road entrance up to Magnolia Street. We added a series of ramps and sloped walkways. That's this hot pink line that goes all the way up without stairs to Magnolia Street. We had to add some new sections down around the gathering area here, and then also a new section leading to this plaza overlook along what is currently a retaining wall.
Oh, Kara, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Angie said that they can no longer hear the interpreter for the Spanish. So I don't know if we need to troubleshoot that real quick.
Just let me know when to continue.
Sure. Oh, okay. Sounds like it's back. Great.
Okay. Great. So due to the very steep grading on this hill and the fact that there's an accessible entrance right here on Intervale Street, we decided to remove this path in order to make this accessible route work up to the top. So over on the north side, we heard a lot of feedback about needing a better route from the school, Roxbury Prep, down to the field. And we also saw on site that there was this desire line going from this entrance straight up to the school, so bypassing these stairs. And in order to make an accessible route work, as well as to accommodate that desire line up to the school, we decided to remove the grand stairs that are here currently leading down to the overlook, and instead have a shorter route that follows the desire line right up to the school entrance, and an accessible route that swings around and up to Magnolia Street, and tuck in where it swings around a set of spectator seating, which was highly desired from scheme 2 or concept 2. In this slide, we had the arrows are removed, so you can see a little bit more detail. You can see where we're showing ramp. And when I say ramp, I mean a path that has handrails, and it has the maximum steepness that we can have by regulation, and also sloped walkways and stairs. Over at the northern route by the school, it's a little bit more clear. You can see there's a new stairway going up what's currently a steep slope, and then also this ramp going down and up and connecting to that overlook with seating at the overlook. So next, safety measures are really focused around the entrances, activity areas, and that main north-south route we heard people often take when they get off the bus at night. The yellow dot shows where we're planning on putting new path lighting. There will also be some new lighting at the basketball court. We're also showing in pink, those are proposed security cameras at the entrances, sort of major, what we think might be spots where people will gather. And then 2 blue lights, one at either end of the field, which are also 2 entrances. And then we're also planning on including some new signage. And the idea with this signage is that it will say not only what the expectations are for how to use the park, but it'll also have some contact information if you want to report that the park needs maintenance or there's a safety concern. And I should mention that the blue lights, if people don't know what a blue light is, it is a fixture that's permanent in the park, and it can dial directly to emergency services such as 911. So next, the field renovation, some details about that. We're really excited about being able to propose spectator seating above the wall. This was something we heard resoundingly. People would like to see that, partially because having people on the field during soccer games was, it's a bit of a safety issue because they're so close to the actual players. So our hope is that by providing these accessible routes up to the top of the wall, and seating there, we're going to start pulling some people off of the sidelines and up to have both great views and also make it better for the players themselves. We're also going to add a storage box so that people can keep equipment there. This would be primarily for teams who are registering their events. There will be team benches on both sides of the field, shown in blue. And this is because we heard that people like the option of being able to pick which side they're on based on where the crowd is or where the sun is. And then, of course, there will be new turf and new goals. You'll also notice that there's this dark green line at the bottom of the field. And that is also from Scheme 2 about fitness. We heard that people would love to have a 100-meter track. This was mostly from the coaches we talked to and the school, so that they can do different kinds of racing and activity to kind of diversify the athletics that were able to happen on this field. And we also heard that regular park users, so general park users, people who are walking their dog or going there every day, they really want to see, they would love to have a sort of a more specified place to walk around the field. So we're proposing adding signs that's noted by the letter S that are prompts for stretches or exercise. And they would also have a little map and a description so you could see how far it is from point to point along the field. There'll be some vibrant path markings to kind of encourage you to follow and to really give it more of a sense of presence, even though it's part of these other circulation routes. And then we're also proposing having fitness equipment spread around this route. So both at this plaza, but also a few small areas along the way. So that fitness equipment that would be over at the Columbia Street gathering area, it would be one of the ways that we're trying to diversify the programming that's here and really tie it to the field. There are a few other design moves that we want to take to tie this area to the field and really activate it. When we went to the site, and what we heard from other people is that this area feels a little bit remote and sunken and removed from what's going on. So we're doing a few things. We're pulling in some more activity elements, the fitness tables, play and making sure that there's a working water area. But we're also lifting up the grade so that it matches the hill next to it, the beginning of that slope going up. So it doesn't feel like a sunken area anymore. Instead, it's more like terraces where you can walk from, you can walk directly onto the grass here, you can walk directly onto the grass here, you can walk directly onto the grass here. So there's 3 levels. The first level is really about gathering at the field with seating that faces the field and this ramp up to the seating area adjacent to the field. And then you can continue either by stairs or by this additional ramp onto the second level, which has some of that fitness equipment or tables, informal seating, that cooling station with some kind of water feature that's more of a space to walk through and less like focused on toddlers running through jets. And then going up to the third level, we have play elements that take advantage of the slope, like a slide coming down, steps going up, or even seating integrated into that slope. And you'll also notice that the circulation you can see going around the field, sorry, around the gathering area. There's both that direct quick route using stairs going straight up to Magnolia Street. And then there's also the accessible route that goes through and around the programming with connections at many points. So a lot of questions about the material for the slide. That's a great question. A metal slide is a burn hazard. Yes, good point. We can do a few things. One thing we can do is have a concrete slide potentially, which we've used, for example, at City Hall. They don't get quite as hot. Or as pointed out, we can cover it with a shade sail or tent. This area is already pretty shady because of the buildings right next to it. I'm going to go back. It's already pretty shady because of both the existing trees on one side and then the buildings on the other side, but definitely we will do shade studies and make sure no one's getting burned. So we're diversifying the different amenities offered down at Columbia Street, but we also want to make sure that we're diversifying what's happening up at Magnolia Street and pulling people between the playground and that field, trying to make the field more of a usable, Columbia Road, between the field and play, trying to make it more of a usable area. So we're pulling in the loop path from concept 1 that people really liked and adding some of those fun playground markings onto the path to encourage kids to go around and potentially with a bike or add their own designs with chalk, play sidewalk games. We're also adding some picnic stations with benches and tables around the edge, including at the updated overlook. And then we're trying to make sure that it really connects to the play area itself by moving the entrance of play to where it aligns with this curve. On the Magnolia Street playground, on the Magnolia Street playground, we're taking that focus from concept 1 that people really liked of nature play and having sort of diverse spaces. And since it is a small site, we use planting strategically to create different groupings, different areas, sort of spaces to explore and navigate through. And then also using the play equipment to emphasize that nature theme. So as you enter from the street, you have to your left a toddler focused area, in front of you through 2 planters, a swing area, and then to your right, past a picnic table and bench, you have the 5 to 12 elementary school play structure area. The toddler area has this sort of secret path through grass with some flowering trees protecting it from the edge, and then a little acorn seating group right there. So working on the nature theme, creating those hidden moments to go find, but not too hidden because it is on lawn. And then it has a play structure that is really dense. Both of these play structures are really dense. They provide a lot of play value with different kinds of play. So imaginary play, climbing, stretching, physical activity, and also hopefully discovery. And then over, I should say the slide, that we're constantly thinking about how to make things more universal. So one of those ways is by providing lots of different types of swings. Both of the play structures definitely have transfer stations, which is something that makes it accessible for people who are coming from wheelchairs. We also are envisioning that the ground plane is entirely level. So currently there's the entrance out of asphalt and then a big dip because we're using mulch that's not level. This we envision would be safety surface, so it's very easy to navigate around. And then of course the picnic tables would have pull-in spaces for anyone on wheels. The different playground equipment shown in the previous page is just an example. If anyone has strong preferences for what's shown here, we would love to hear them and have it be part of the discussion. Something more explicitly nature themed versus what was shown on the previous page, which was like about being at the top of a mountain, so the summit because you're way high up, or something that's a little bit more community focused with a fire truck and different houses. And then the last slide about improvements we have is the basketball improvements. We're definitely going to be resurfacing, hopefully with colorful paint. One of the things we heard from respondents was that they would love for the park to be very colorful and bright. We also will be planting some more shade trees around the edges in clusters to give it a little bit more of a naturalistic look. Providing new fencing, particularly along Magnolia Street, and adding benches and updating hoops. So there were a few questions that came in. One is any space being made available for concessions? Concessions would probably fit on the Columbia Road entrance. But I will leave it to Amy to add anything further in the discussion. That's something we haven't talked too explicitly about. And then another question that just came in is the play area going to replace the small playground on Magnolia close to Lawrence Ave? And this is the play area that we're replacing, just to make sure you can see it in context. The last thing I wanted to show was just a section of what this looks like all put together. We have this updated play area up at Magnolia Street. We have the loop path where people can be running around and circling and sitting at new picnic tables, having that great overlook to the field and the physical connection starting right at that overlook. And then down at the field, an updated area for everyone to play, but also this new field route that will help diversify the kinds of activities that can happen on the field itself. So we're really excited about this plan, and we would love to discuss it more with you, hear what can be, you know, what we are still working on, and just move forward. So I'll kick it back to Amy to lead discussion.
Thanks, Kara. Let's see. I know we've been kind of covering the questions in the chat as they come in, but I think I see Mike has another one. The gathering space on Magnolia Street, can there be a spot for a porta potty. We are currently renting one since we are using the basketball court on Saturdays. Yeah, I think we could certainly look into that. I think there's certainly a rationale for having one near a playground too. So Mike, the one that you rent now, is it in that lawn area currently? Okay, no, that's good to know. Okay, so we'll make a note of that. And then going back to, okay, thank you. I think I have seen it. I just had it slipped my memory, but going back to Charles' question about concessions, I'm not sure if you were specifically asking about like a structure or just space where something could be set up for events, but I think it would have to be something that's a little more flexible, like a space where a tent could be set up versus, you know, a physical permanent structure. But that, I think that is part of what we're thinking in that lower level, that there's some flexibility there. I guess the tables, maybe that's a good question about whether or not those tables, we probably assumed they were fixed in place. But if there's sort of a desire for some options and flexibility, then maybe that's something that we consider. I think that if we had tables there, they would typically be, you know, mounted, surface mounted, so that they don't get tipped or moved. But I think that's a good point, or a good thought to consider. And then I think, Mike, you had another question about turf, and was that specific to the field turf, or was that when we were looking at the field soccer? Yeah, so that is a synthetic turf, you know, replacing what's out there now, but with a improved shock pad. So I think that it'll be a much better surface, a much safer surface, but really knowing that a natural turf field is just really reduces the amount of use that it can handle. It's something that we're just trying to avoid here, because it would unfortunately probably turn into a dirt patch, and it's a popular field. It gets, you know, it's programmed heavily and used quite a lot. So that's really something that I mean, there's pros and cons to both each approach, but it's really just kind of what our limitation is maintenance wise that really pushes us towards the synthetic, and also just allowing for a greater use of the field, no matter what the weather. You know, really with the natural turf, in rain conditions, it can't be used. So we're just really trying to make sure that it's serving the large number of people that are depending on it as a play space. Let's see. Dog poop drop boxes. Okay. And the concerns about synthetic turf. I mean, we do specify something that's for the infill is a, you know, virgin material. I think at one point there was use of like recycled tires, which I think had health implications. So we're not using that. You know, testing around PFAS. So at least within a certain, you know, I guess range of chemicals, it's proven to be free of those, given the testing that's done. Okay, thank you, Julie, for joining us. And then Charles responded again to say that he was thinking about something like an ice cream hut. Yeah, I think that wouldn't really be an option for us to build something permanent and physical there. I think in terms of programming, there may be something that, you know, can come in the summer, like you're saying. I think that's certainly an interesting idea, but maybe a little bit beyond kind of what we're thinking about now in terms of the capital improvements. But we'll keep that in mind. And then dog waste. Yeah. I think, yeah, dog waste bags. I mean, maybe we can consider that. I think it might be something that gets concentrated around the perimeter because like for the playground for example, that's really not an area where dogs are intended to go, but we can look at that and think about where those dog walking areas are most concentrated.
Can I ask, I want to, if possible, hear a little bit more about, just so we understand what's the priority in terms of what a dog waste container would add. Would it be having bags, or would it be like that it's covered or closed in some way to prevent smell? Or is it just having the signage so that the expectation is set?
I'm assuming they're talking about like the dispenser for the bags and then like typically, okay. Yeah, Mike, will let you.
Mm-hmm. Just so I know, what, I want to make sure we understand what people are referring to when they're suggesting it.
Garrett, do you have to unmute him or is it?
I think I just stood there. Yep.
Okay, cool.
And I think Elson will weigh in as well. I think the problem is that with the Frederick, behind the Little Frederick School, is that even though there's signs asking people not to walk their dogs, people still walk their dogs, and then the dog waste ends up on the field and so forth. So folks are suggesting that maybe as a way to as an alternative, as a way of containers that would help to that people may be more inclined to be more considerate and dispose of their dog waste. I mean, it's not a guarantee, but at least we give them some incentive. But I think Elsa has some ideas about that as well.
Yes, thanks, Mike. That's what I meant. Not necessarily providing the bags or anything like that. There were quite a few responsible dog owners, but then, there's the other end of that spectrum. So just having places where they could drop the dog waste rather than carry it around. I think that might assist in them getting in the habit, those who do not, to drop them in.
And that would be separate from a regular trash can. That would be like the signage is important.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So that it's, trash is so that it's specifically for dog waste.
Okay.
Maybe next to a trash can or just along the what would be an anticipated route of folks walking their dogs, usually around the grassy areas, just in a couple of spots. Also,
Yeah.
while I am unmuted, there's a little parkour feature at the current playground there on Magnolia that my grandson really enjoys. So I'm just getting it all in. Sorry if somebody already mentioned it in the chat or in previous meetings, but just incorporating some of those nice elements there as well. I didn't see it in some of the suggestions in that slide you had, but maybe keeping some of those parkour type that did like there's 3 yellow swing type circle things that they can skip with their arms. It's like a monkey bar, but it moves.
Oh, okay.
Overall, very lovely plan, I must say. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. I'm a big, I love playgrounds and have little kids, so I love hearing what other people are actually using and want to see in their park.
One thing, and we should ask Mr. Knight if he has any more information. I understand that Mr. Knight had found some information that Bill Russell might have a connection with the basketball court. If there's ways that we can find any sort of historical references to any of the park, including the basketball court, it would be nice to kind of include that so people kind of understand the history of the park and understand the significance of who some of the patrons or some of the participants were around the park. So Mr. Knight, if you're able to find anything, that would be very helpful.
I'm gonna share my screen again with the plan. There's a question about repairs or reconstruction of the upper park on Lawrence Ave and Magnolia Street. So we're planning on rebuilding the playground with new equipment and surfacing, keeping the existing trees and the vegetation around the edge as it currently is. We're planning on leaving the lawn largely in place with the slope that it has, but adding this loop path that goes around and has some picnic areas on the sides, improving the overlook, and then beginning the long accessible path down to Columbia Road. And then we're also planning on updating the basketball court. And there are a few trees in this area that are, they look almost okay, but they're actually being struck by a pest called the emerald ash borer. And so we will be removing those trees as they're likely to die in the next few years and replacing them with trees of diverse species that have no known pests. Female trees to avoid pollen overload. We hadn't thought that far, but that's an idea. So there's, Amy, do you want to handle the water comment?
Water at the court, so like a drinking fountain at the basketball court, sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's a valid point. It might be something that we could certainly look at and just try to understand if it's feasible budget wise, but yeah, I think it's a nice idea for sure.
Yes, and apologies for not including locations of future water fountains on the plan, but there definitely will be at least one, probably two water fountains at the lower level.
And that's where there's current location would certainly the infrastructure's there, making it a little bit easier and more cost effective, but
the question about cleaning up branches at the basketball court, that was something that we've heard and noticed on site as well, and spoke with the arborists about. So we'll keep that in mind as we look at a final placement of trees around the basketball court, and also keep that in mind with which species of trees we select. The species that's currently there did, as Kira mentioned, there were some issues with the emerald ash borer with the ash trees, and then there's another species of tree that had a lot of dead wood that we'll avoid as well.
So we got another question about an enclosed fence at the upper playground. And yes, that one will have an enclosed fence with the gate shown where the new entrance is. The lower play area, we don't plan on having a fence, although we did hear from some people in meeting two that one of the reasons they don't send their kids to play there is because it's close to Columbia Road and doesn't have a fence. We're hoping that by sort of lifting it up and creating those terraces will provide a little bit more of a separation from the road, and also having the tables and fitness equipment before the play in terms of between the road and the play. That will also help create a stronger sense of separation. Yeah, it's a tough call about having a fence around this play area. We heard from people who are watching games that they like to have something for their kids to do, be able to be next to the field, watching the game, but also playing with their kids. So that's why we really went with the direction of this connectivity across from the play area and the fitness area onto that slope that overlooks the field, and putting a fence around it, around the whole area would really get in the way of that. If we hear a lot of feedback about wanting a fence, we could consider it around specifically the play equipment. Amy, did you want to add anything?
yeah, I mean, I think just that maybe that area we're still sort of thinking about it too, and how the different kind of programmatic elements work together. And I think that's something that, we could think about, thinking about safety, but also what sort of makes sense and circulation wise.
Some parks do have a fence at the main entrance. They have a gate that opens and closes, which is also an idea, but that obviously is less welcoming than having it be open.
Let's see, I think Jessica had a question about the timeline and the budget. We could maybe go back to that slide. I think slide 10 with the schedule. The budget, the construction budget is 3.3 million. And, I think we're certainly running up against that because of some of the items like introducing the lighting and the security cameras. One thing that we just put the turf work out to bid, so it'll be informative to see how that comes back, if it's close to what we estimated, but a lot of these numbers are fluctuating, so it's sometimes hard to tell, but that'll sort of also drive what's left for the remainder of the park. But then the timeline in here on the schedule that you can see, so we're working through design development and the construction documents into the fall, and then the targeted start for construction is early, so maybe February, depending on weather, 2024. I think maybe fall might be a little, now that I'm looking at this, maybe a little optimistic, but early 2025, at least ready for the 2025 season. So that's roughly where we are. I mean, schedules, we'll certainly be continuing to work on this. I think there's often things that come up that can sort of slow things or derail things a little bit, but I will certainly plan to keep everyone informed if things change, or keep everyone updated on the schedule. So hopefully that we still stay relatively close to this, but I think that's sort of roughly what we're targeting. Yeah, thanks, Charles, for that background info. Does anyone have any other thoughts or questions? Again, I want to encourage you, if anything comes up, later, to email me. I'm going to ask Angie, who has a few people in a room there, and just see if anyone has a question. Great. Thank you, Elsa, for joining us and for your comments. Thank you, Patricia. Okay. Great. Angie said no questions, so yeah, we are thinking we'd like to give people a chance to make comments on the plan. So we're wanting to put a short survey together, like we've done in the previous meetings, and so that's likely to be available in, we'll say, next week. But that'll just be a chance to look at the plans again. If there's any other comments, preferences, people can reiterate those there, and then we'll post this presentation to the webpage and also the video recording, so you can look back at it. And yeah, Mike, thank you. Great. So I think we'll let everyone go, and we really appreciate you attending, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.